Hey guys, Miss Parrish here. I am coming to you to do our lesson today on the distributive property. Distributive property is one of the properties that we talked about in our lesson on identifying properties the other day. So this is the main property that our sixth grade standards say that you need to know how to use and identify and work with. Um, so the first thing you're going to need, if you don't already have something handy, you will need a sheet of paper. For this, we are not doing guided notes on this. We want you guys to actually be writing out your notes and working these problems, not, stressed about trying to type into those text boxes. So have a sheet of paper. There's going to be some things, some steps or different things you're going to need to write down. And we are going to ask that you write every example down. This will get you prepared for the assignment later. And you will submit a picture of your notes. Since we're not doing guided notes, you will need to submit a picture of these notes showing where you did, in fact, write the information and work out the examples. Okay, so if you need to pause this to get pencil and paper, please do so. Our standard for this, we are still in the EE standards. That's for expressions and equations. The standard says you can apply the properties of operations to generate equivalent expressions. And our essential question is, what is the distributive property and how can we use it to write equivalent expressions? So today we're going to focus on working problems out using the distributive property. And then a lesson later this week, we'll be talking more about equivalent, how to make them equivalent, okay? Now, before we get into working out distributive property, our lesson on identifying properties the other day, some students seem to grasp that pretty well. Some seem to have trouble. So just a quick review. Now, this is probably something good to write down. This will help you. We are going to have a properties quiz later this week, so it may be good to write this down. I know you had those guided notes in Google Classroom for this lesson, so this may be very good to write down. I tried to make it short and sweet with a short definition and examples, but I would write all of this down and I would use this to help me review for any of the future assignments and especially for the quiz that we have coming up where you have to identify properties. So as I'm going through this, write these down. If you're not finished when I'm finished going through it, just pause the video and finish writing them down. But this will be very important and very helpful for the upcoming quiz. Not necessarily for today's lesson, but it's a good review. The first property we talked about was the commutative property. I talked to my class about how the word commute means to move. We commute every day from home to school, school to home. So the commutative property means that the numbers move, they move or change their order, but the answer does not change. Now, this is true for only addition and multiplication. And if you look at the examples for addition, I have 3 plus 7 is equal to 7 plus 3. That means if you add 3 plus 7, you get 10. Or if you add 7 plus 3, you still get 10. So the numbers can move or change their order, but it doesn't change the answer. Same thing for multiplication. I use the number touching the parentheses, which we talked about the other day, means multiplication. I just wanted you to see that a little more. So this is saying 6 times 4 is equal to 4 times 6. So think about, what is 6 times 4? It's 24. What is 4 times 6? It's still 24. So in the commutative property, the numbers move or change their order, but the answer does not change. Associative property. Now in the associative property, you're going to see parentheses. You can see parentheses in the commutative property as well, but you definitely have to have them in the associative property. The associative property tells us, and the important thing to remember is the numbers do not move. Only the grouping changes. Only the numbers in the parentheses is what changes. We talked in class about coag. The CO means for commutative, the order changes, and for associative, the grouping changes. Okay, so that's another way you can remember that. So the big difference between commutative and associative is the numbers in the associative property do not move. They do not change position. Okay, if the numbers move, then they're not associative. It's commutative. So for the associative property of addition, You'll notice in this example, we have 2 plus the sum of 6 and 5 is equal to the sum of 2 and 6 plus 5. The big thing to notice here is the order of my numbers did not change. Okay, we still have the 2, the 6, and the 5 on the left, and then the 2, the 6, and the 5 in the same order on the right. 2 is first on both sides, 6 is in the middle on both sides, and 5 is at the end on both sides. So the numbers did not move or change place, only the parentheses did, the grouping. Same for the multiplication example. We have 7 times the product of 8 times 9 is equal to the product of 7 times 8 times 9. Same thing here, guys. You'll notice 7 is the first digit on both sides of the equal sign, 8 is the center digit on both sides, and 9 is the last digit on both sides. So big thing, the numbers do not move. I would even underline the word do not. That's very important there. Okay. The next property that we talked about in class is the identity property. And this property says that you can add 0 or multiply 1 to a number and it will not change the number. Okay, I talked to my class about how each of us have our own identity. I can put a hat on and I am still Miss Parrish. Mr. Harden could shave his head and he would still be Mr. Harden. Okay, so in this property, the number does not change. Look, for example, at the addition example. We have 5 plus 0 equals 5. So the 5 did not change. It stayed the 5. Multiplication. You can multiply a number times 1. In this case, we did 12 times 1, and we still get 12. Okay, so the 12 did not change. So for the identity property, you want to think about how the number is either being added to 0 or multiplying by 1, and it does not change. Okay, so when you're trying to identify with whether something is the identity property, look and see, did the number change from the first part of the problem to the end? It did not change. So that's the identity property. The last one was the 0 property. This property states that any number multiplied by 0 equals 0. I talked in class about how sometimes people get this confused with the identity property of addition, because in the identity property of addition that we just talked about, they'll see a 0 in the problem and they automatically think that that's the 0 property. But remember, in the 0 property, your answer equals 0. Okay, you're multiplying a number times 0 and it equals 0. I told my kids the word 0 starts with a Z, which is at the end of the alphabet, and the 0 is at the end of the problem here. Okay, so the 0 property, anytime you multiply a number times 0, the answer is 0. You're looking for that 0 in the answer. Okay, so if you're still copying these down, you're free to pause this. Like I said, this is very important. This will help you tremendously as you review for the quiz on identifying properties later this week. Okay, now the focus of today's lesson is the distributive property. Okay, now I'm going to read this big definition. You do not have to write this definition. I'm going to have you write the simplified version on the next slide. I know this is a lot. If you want to write this one, you're welcome to, but I'm going to request, have you write for sure the simplified version on the next slide. But this is the kind of the fancy mathematical definition for distributive property. And it says multiplying a number by a sum, meaning A plus B, or the difference, A minus B, is the same as multiplying by each number in the sum or each number in the difference, and then adding and subtracting. So that's kind of a mouthful. So like I said, we're going to focus on the simplified version in a second. Now, in the distributive property, we are going to be using what we call the rainbow or shooting stars. Okay, I typically refer to it as the rainbow. That was just the way I was taught growing up. I think Miss Klein calls it shooting stars. Not sure which one Mr. Harden uses, but it's going to be the same thing. Okay, so if you have Miss Klein and she refers to it as shooting stars in class, and I've said rainbow here in the video, it's the same thing. So they kind of the same concept. Either word works. One thing I want you to think about with the distributive property is think about it as distributing things or handing things out equally. In my class the other day when we first talked about distributive property, I said, imagine that I brought cupcakes to class. Well, if I only distributed the cupcakes to half the class, is that fair? And of course, they were all like, no. Um, so in the distributive property, you have to distribute the numbers to all of the number on the outside of the parentheses to all of the numbers inside. And this will make sense when we do the examples. But I want you to think about when you're distributing this, you have to distribute it to every number because sometimes people will leave one of the numbers out. Okay. So we're going to talk about that as we go through this. Now, this is the simple terms. That was the fancy math talk. Write down what you see in the blue writing right here with the little asterisks. This is a good way to remember distributive property. So write distributive property. You want to take the number on the outside of the parentheses and multiply it by both numbers on the inside. Okay, you're going to have a number on the outside of the parentheses and you want to multiply it by both numbers on the inside. So make sure you're writing that down. That's very important. And that's what I was talking about with distributing equally. A lot of people forget to multiply it by the second number. You have to multiply it by every number equally to be fair, however you want to think about it. Okay. Now, so we're going to rainbow in this example, you'll notice they're going to rainbow the 4, which is the number on the outside of the parentheses. Okay, we're going to rainbow that. Let me make sure my volume is good. Sorry, I have a fear of it not picking me up here. Okay, so we're going to rainbow or multiply the number that's on the outside of the parentheses times both numbers on the inside. Okay, so we're going to be drawing arrows, and this is what we refer to as the rainbow or the shooting stars. Okay, so part of your work, when you show your work on your examples and on your homework, draw those arrows. Okay, that's going to remind you, hey, I've got to multiply this 4 times the 1, and I have to multiply it times the 3. Okay, so this is showing you a couple ways we can write this. So one way what we're basically doing when, like I said, we're going to multiply the number on the outside times each number on the inside. So when you show your work, you're going to write out kind of like expanded form, kind of like what we did with exponents. We're going to show our multiplication here. Okay. So you'll notice we're going to do 4 times 1. So underneath our main problem, we've written in parentheses 4 times 1. You can use the X. Remember with algebra, sometimes you have to be careful and may want to use the dot instead if you've got an X as a variable, which we'll look at later. But we're doing 4 times 1. Notice you're adding the 1 and the 3, so you want to put a plus sign. And then we're going to multiply the 4 times the 3. So we've got that in parentheses. So we've written out kind of like an expanded form type thing. And then you're going to multiply each part in the parentheses. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus 4 times 3 is 12, and then you can add those and get your answer. Now, I also showed a way you can do it using parentheses. Okay, we talked last week about how the number touching the parentheses means to multiply. Okay, so this would be 4 times 1 is 4, plus 4 times 3 is 12, and then 4 plus 12 is 16. So when you're writing this out, guys, you can use the X as multiplication. You can use the dot like we've done before, or you can even do the parentheses where they're touching. So to make sure you've written this example, that you've written what's in blue up here, this sentence in blue, and then we're going to start practicing. All right, so here's our first example. So I want you to write down 2, and in parentheses, put 4 plus 6. Okay, so what this is basically saying is the number on the outside of the parentheses. It's touching the outside of the parentheses. So we've got to multiply it times each number on the inside. So once you've written the problem down, I want you to draw an arrow from the 2 to the 4. And I want you to draw an arrow from the 2 to the 6. Okay. Now we're going to write out the expanded form. And I'm doing this from home, so I hope my handwriting's not too messy. So we're going to do 2 times 4, because that's what that first arrow told us to do. 2 times 4. Now notice you've got, what's your sign right here? Sometimes it's addition, sometimes it's subtraction. So you can circle that if you want to make sure you're paying attention. Plus, now our second arrow takes us from the 2 to the 6. So that means we need to do 2 times 6. So now I've written out my multiplication, and so now I can work on solving it. So I have 2 times 4 is 8, plus 2 times 6 is 12. And then what is 8 plus 12? It is 20. So we're almost making little cyclones. But 20 would be my answer. Okay, like I said, the biggest mistake sixth graders make is they forget, they'll draw that second arrow, but then they end up forgetting to actually multiply the number on the outside times the second digit in the parentheses. So please make sure that's why it's important to write it out like this. That helps you remember that I had to multiply that number on the outside, in this case the 2, times both numbers on the inside. Okay, you can pause anytime you need to catch up. All right, let's try another example. Okay, write down 4 times in parentheses 3 plus 2. Now remember, you draw the arrows or your shooting stars or your rainbows. So 4 to the 3 and rainbow over to the 2. That's going to remind me that I'm multiplying 4 times the 3. Look at your sign in the middle. Plus 4 times 2. Okay, you should be multiplying it times both numbers. Now 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 times 2 is 8. And who knew that was going to give us the same answer? 20. Okay, this is all part of showing your work, guys. Okay, you can't shortcut it. Okay, you've got to show all of your work. This is what Mr. Harden and Miss Klein and myself are going to be looking for when you turn in your work. Okay, so please make sure that you are showing all of this, just like we've asked in other assignments when you're supposed to show your work. All right, so this is what you do when you have just numbers through the whole thing. Okay, now as you know, we're in algebra now. So in algebra, a lot of times we use variables. And we talked last week about what a variable is. If you remember, a variable is a letter that represents an unknown number. Okay, so you can do this with variables, but you're limited in how far you can take it. And I'll talk about that as we go through. So in your notes, you can just write, distributive with variables or with variables. But I definitely want you to write what's in purple right here. This is just a little simple rhyme that I say with my kids every year, and I make them repeat it over and over in class because it helps them remember what to do. Okay, I say multiply a number and a letter, put them together. Okay, multiply a number and a letter, put them together. So write that little rhyme down, and that hopefully will help you remember what to do. Okay. So sometimes, as you see in this example, you've got 2 times y plus 6. Okay, they're not telling us, like they did the other day in evaluating expressions, they're not telling us what y is yet. Okay, so you cannot just put a number in, you can't pick a number, you have to leave it alone. Okay, so we're going to do this just like we did our numbers. We're going to do our little rainbow from the 2 to the y, and our rainbow from the 2 to the 6, or your shooting stars. And they're going to write this one out. Okay, now this is really not a good idea to use the X when you've got a Y there, but it won't let me put a dot in on this. So we've got 2 times Y. So we've rainbowed from the 2 to the Y. So 2 times Y plus 2 times 6. Okay, so we're writing it out just like we did the ones that were all numbers. You still have to multiply the number on the outside times each item on the inside. But now here's the thing you have to remember. We'll go back to this little rhyme. Multiply a number and a letter, put them together. So if I'm doing 2 times y, I don't know what y is yet. So I have to write it as simply 2y. That's what I mean by put them together. Okay. If you're multiplying a number and a letter and they don't tell you what number to put in for the variable, you just put them together. Okay. They just go straight together like peanut butter and jelly. So multiply a number times the letter, put them together. So that becomes 2y plus, and you can add 2 times 6 and get 12. Okay. Now this is important right here, and you may want to write this down that's in this red box. When you're using variables, once you do the distributive property and you get to this point, guys, this is your answer for now. Okay. You cannot add the numbers together unless they both have the same variable attached. Okay. The 2 has a y attached to it. The 12 has nothing attached to it. Okay. So you cannot add the 2 and the 12 together and get 14y. You can't do that. That is not correct. Okay. So we'll say that again. You cannot add them together unless they have the same variable attached. If I was taking notes, I would write this down. This is extremely important. Okay, this will help you on your homework. Now, if the 12 had a y attached, then I could. It's like a matching game. And we're going to get into combining these things in a later lesson this week. Okay, but for now, just know I cannot add those together. The 2 has a y, the 12 does not. Okay, so make sure you write that down. Very important. So let's try another one. So 4 times w plus 3. Let's make sure you write that down. Draw your rainbows or your shooting stars from the number on the outside, which is the 4, times both items on the inside. So now we're going to write it 4 times w plus, always watch your sign there, 4 times 3. Okay, you're not adding anything on the inside of the parentheses, you're multiplying the number on the outside. So we've got 4 times w. Again, we don't know what w is. Remember the little rhyme from the previous slide. Multiply a number times a letter, put them together. So that's just going to be 4w plus, what's 4 times 3? 12. And remember, that is your final answer because the 4 has a w attached, the 12 does not. So they are not, you can't add those together. Can't do it. Don't do it. Okay. Take you a minute to copy any of that down. Okay, let's try another one with a variable. 7 times the sum of p and 9. So 7 times p plus 9. Draw those arrows, those shooting stars, those rainbows. Okay, 7 times p plus, this is still plus, should have thrown a subtraction in to see if we were paying attention. 7 plus, or times, I was talking about plus. Sorry, that should be times 9. 7 times p plus 7 times 9. Again, multiply a number times a letter, put them together. And 7 times 9 is 63. 7 has a p, 63 does not. You cannot add those together. Okay. Now, another way you may see some of these is if your variable has a term attached, or a number, I'm sorry. Meaning if you've got a number and a variable together, like you see in this one, you've got 5 and y together on the inside. So that means when this says, what if a term has a variable attached, that means what if the variable already has a number attached to it? Okay, so make sure you're copying these down. These may be some you'll see, and if you've got all this written in your notes, your homework will be a piece of cake. Okay, so in this one, you've got 4 on the outside. So we're going to multiply 4 times the 5y plus 4 times the 2. So you can see the expanded form kind of written out here. You've got 4 times, just like we wrote everything else, you're going to write the 4 times, whatever the first part is, 5y plus the 4 times the 2. Okay, now when you go to multiply the 4 times the 5y, When you have a number attached to the variable already, like the 5 and the y are here, you are going to multiply the two numbers together, 4 times 5, and 4 times 5 is 20, and then you still just bring that variable down. You leave it attached, okay? Multiply a number times the letter, put them together. Well, the y is already attached to that number, so you just multiply the two numbers, the 4 and the 5, and get 20, and just bring the y down attached to it, okay? And then you have your plus, and 4 times 2 is 8. And again, this would be your final answer because the 20 has a y, the 8 does not. Like I said, it's almost like a matching game, and we'll talk about that later this week. So you cannot add those together. Okay, let's try another one here. So write down 3 times, parentheses, 4x plus 2. 3 times 4x plus 2. Okay, draw your rainbows or your shooting stars. Write it out. So 3. Now this is kind of weird to use the x for multiplication when you have x as a variable. So I'm going to do a dot. We talked about if you have too many x's, you don't know what means multiplication and which one's a variable. Plus 3 times 2. You could have even written it like this. I'm going to go to the side and show you. You could have also done 3 and you just use the parentheses for multiplication. Okay. So we'll say or. So when your variable is an x, you do not want to do this. I want to go up to the top and show you what not to do. 3 times 4. Now that looks like 3x, 4x. You don't know which part's multiplication. So don't do that. Okay. If your variable's an x and you're multiplying, use a dot like in this first part, or what I did over here to the right-hand side using just parentheses. Okay. That way you're not confusing the variable and the multiplication sign. So when I go to multiply 3 times 4x, remember, multiply a number times the letter, put them together. 3 times 4 is 12, and I keep the x, plus 3 times 2 is 6. The 12 has an x, the 6 does not, so they cannot go together. I'm finished. If you did the parentheses form, same concept. 3 times 4 is 12x, plus 3 times 2 is 6. So either way, you get the same answer. Okay, so remember, if your variable is an x, probably don't want to use x for the multiplication sign too. Okay, use the dot or the parentheses method that we talked about. Take a minute, copy that if you need to. Let's do one more. 2 times 3g plus 2. Take a minute and copy that down. Don't forget to take a minute and try that one on your own. And then I'll go over it. See if you can do that one on your own. Okay. Make sure you're drawing those rainbows, shooting stars. Make sure you are showing your multiplication. 2 times 3g plus 2 times 2. I kind of stuck with the dot. You could have used the x on this one since it's a variable is g. 2 times 3 is 6. Put the g with it. Plus 2 times 2 is 4. 6 has a g, 4 does not. They don't match. I cannot add those together. So my final answer is 6g plus 4. Okay, now in the future, you're going to be able to do this without using the parentheses. And what I mean by that's all the extra stuff, the expanded form that I'm calling it up here. Okay. You can do it without parentheses. We want you to use the parentheses today. Okay. This is not permission to not show your work. We want you to show your work on these today. We're just showing you for in the future how you can do it without using the extra parentheses. Okay. So for this one, you would have 5 times 6y minus 9. We do have subtraction now. You still want to show your rainbows or shooting stars. Okay. because that's reminding you to multiply times both numbers. Remember, you're distributing the 5 to both numbers. Okay, not one. You got to be fair. You got to give it to everybody in class. Give the cupcake to everybody. So this time you can just kind of do it without the extra parentheses and say, what's 5 times 6? 5 times 6 is 30, and you keep the y. This time it's minus, not plus. Be careful with that. And then 5 times 9 is 45. So you're doing the same thing. You're just leaving that one step out. But we don't want you to do that. We want you to show your work today. This is something that we will use later when we're doing other things. Okay, and it would be a time saver. But that's one way you can do it. Like I said, in the future, we still want you to show your work today. All right, let's try this one. Now this one's a little different. We've got 2 different variables happening, but I wanted to show you what to do in this situation. We've got 4x on the outside of the parentheses and y plus 7 on the inside. Okay, so make sure you've written this one down. You may even want to make the note that I've got typed in over here. If there are 2 different variables being multiplied, you just put them together. Okay, kind of like we did the number in the letter. If you're multiplying 2 variables, put them together. So I'll show you what that means. Make sure you draw your rainbows or shooting stars. So now, normally we said multiply a number times the letter, put them together. Okay, so if that was just 4 times y, it'd be 4y. Well, now it's 4x times y. So that just means I'm going to do 4x y. You just put them all together, put the whole thing together. Okay, you just tack the y on to the 4x. Plus, now this time I've got 4x times 7. So just like we did on one of the other slides, multiply the 2 numbers. 4 and 7 is 28, and then the x just tags along. Now, you cannot combine these. Yes, the 4 has an x with it, and the 28 has an x with it, but the 4 also has a y, so that's a package deal, okay? It's the whole thing. That's 4xy. The 28 would have to have both the x and the y, okay? They're similar, but they're not exact, so you cannot add them together, okay? Now, the last thing I want to show you is we've talked about the word equivalent quite a bit this year. We've talked about it with ratios and other things, and we know the word equivalent means equal. Okay, so sometimes you can use the distributive property to determine if 2 expressions are equivalent. Okay, so on your notes, you can put, are these equivalent? Pretty short question there. And then write this problem down. 4x plus 8 equals 4 times the sum of x plus 8. Okay, now you have to look carefully because on this one, on the left side, you've got 4x plus 8 on the left. Okay, that's kind of like an answer we just got to some of these problems. Okay, the 4 has an x, the 8 does not. So we cannot add those together. That side is already complete. We can't do anything else with that. So good news is you don't have to do anything on that side. But on the right side, I do have the 4 times x plus 8 in parentheses, or 4 times the sum of x plus 8. So I do have to simplify this using the distributive property. So I have 4 times x plus 4 times 8. So 4 times x, multiply a number times a letter, put them together. And 4 times 8 is 32. So I want to look and see, bring that down because it's easier to match them up when they're side by side. Are these the same? Are they equal? Well, they both have a 4x, but guys, this side has an 8 and this side has a 32. So no, if they ask you if things like this are equal, you would have to use your distributive property and then compare them. A lot of people just want to look at that first part of the problem and go, oh, there's a 4x and they both have an 8. That's not correct. If you work the second one or the one on the right out using the distributive property, you get 4x plus 32. That is not the same or equivalent to 4x plus 8. Okay, that's just another way you can use the distributive property. Okay, now you do have An assignment in Google Classroom. You have a slides activity, and um, not sure if I have that up on a different computer, so I'm not sure if I have that up on here. I don't think I do. But you will need to complete all slides on your Google Classroom activity. I think the first slide is just a title slide. The second slide has a very short, like 1 to 2 minute video that's going to review that rainbow shooting star thing with you. Have your notes handy that we just took if you need to go back through this video and rewrite or add anything you missed, please do so. So complete all of the slides on the distributed property assignment. You will need to show work on paper for all of the distributive property problems. Okay. I think there's maybe 3 slides where you actually have to work. Don't hold me to that, but all of the ones that have a distributive property problem, you must show those problems on paper. Once you are finished with your assignment, you need to submit a picture of your work showing these notes. That way we know you did take notes. Since we didn't do guided notes today, we want to make sure you are writing this down because that will help you. So you must submit a picture of your completed notes. That means all of these examples um, that we went through, and a picture of where you showed your work for your assignment. Okay, so um, submit the activity and 2 pictures of work. Make sure you label your papers, label which one is the notes, and then label which paper is the actual assignment. Okay, so when your teachers go through to check that, that'll make that process of checking those off quicker. Okay, so label those. Make sure you use these notes from this lesson to help you on the assignment. Okay, make sure you use these notes to review for the properties quiz that we're having later this week. If you did not copy down everything from this first or this review slide, okay, make sure you pause this video or go back into that and do that. Okay, if you have any questions, as always, you may contact your teacher, myself, Mr. Harden, or Miss Klein. And I hope you guys have a great day and a great week. And don't forget your teachers. We all will be having our Google Meets on Wednesdays with you guys. Check your teachers' Google Classroom information for specific information on when you should attend. And I hope you guys have a great day.